I want help. I want to be well.
Well, you could summarize the week 2 of the Lindsay Clancy murder trial as prosecution, stop hitting yourself in the face. Actually, keep on keeping on. You're only helping Lindsay's case. Then Thursday ended with some serious courtroom drama that made me like Reddington even more. So let's talk about it. We're going to fly through the week, just hitting the highlights. So Monday, we are finally almost done with talking to all the first responders. On Monday specifically, we're focusing on Cora. I don't know why they keep doing this. All they're doing is rehashing the same material and making everybody just sad about the kids. But that doesn't mean, that's not showing anything about Lindsay. So it's just weird to me. So then we heard from the doctors who treated Lindsay specifically. We learned that when she first got to the hospital, her body temperature was 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So for our Celsius folks, that's 27.7 degrees Celsius. And according to Dr. Google, normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. So yeah, her bleeding was likely slowed down significantly by the hypothermia from being outside. It took them hours and hours to warm her up. And that by then, clotting had probably already happened. She had lost so much blood, they had to give her a whole bunch of transfusions. We first heard from an ER doctor. I swear she was being deliberately difficult and rude, and it just was like avoiding obvious questions. Like she would technically answer the question, but not really. Like, you know what he was asking. So on cross, it kind of felt like you're asking a child, so where are you right now? Earth. That was that kind of thing. But technically, did she answer the question? Yeah, but that's not what he was actually asking and looking for. It was so obnoxious. She didn't seem prepared. I don't recall. I have to see my report. But did she ever ask to see her report? No. She was just like, no, I don't know. And he goes, did you even prepare for this? Yeah, I don't recall. I don't. This is years ago. I don't recall everything. Well, oh my gosh, dude. The only thing she really recalled is that she had a thoracic injury. But when he then probed further, well, specifically, I don't know. Well, according to the records, it says that she had a complete transection at T56. Okay. I just wanted to strangle her. But she had a complete transection at 5 and 6. So then this doctor said that means the bones are completely apart. But it also means the spinal cord was severed there. That's why Lindsay's paralyzed. Lindsay had severe edema in her chest. They had to drain a ton of fluid from the C spine at the top of the neck, so then from C7 down to T4. So a whole bunch of swelling in there. Once she was stable in the ER, she was transferred to another hospital. And we heard from a sergeant from the police who took photos and swabs from Lindsay at the hospital. Then we heard from this trauma surgical ICU nurse, and I loved her. So she talked about how Lori came to her from the MRI. She was intubated. She had a cardiac arrest that first night in the hospital. She coded, like her heart stopped. They had to revive her. And that's when they had to do the massive blood transfusions. Without quick intervention and lots of intervention and modern technology, she would have died. There is no pretending that this is a fake attempt, which is what the prosecution keeps implying. It's just been obnoxious. Even if it had been a fake attempt, so what? I'm not sure what that tells us about psychosis or not, or her culpability with the kids. The prosecution's arguments don't make sense. I can't figure out their strategy because it seems like they're just throwing crap against the wall and they don't even know what might stick. It's weird. So then the nurse tells us that when she was extubated, she communicated on a whiteboard. The prosecution made a lot about the fact that she asked at some point for a lawyer. I can see her remembering vaguely like what had happened and realizing she'll need a lawyer, or we do know that she probably needed a lawyer to change her paperwork for the power of attorney on her like healthcare proxy. And I can see her thinking, he's going to divorce me, which he did, and so I'll need someone else. And so she was going to move her parents to be her healthcare proxy. The prosecution at one point said, is that because she wouldn't trust her husband to do what's best for her? Objection, and that was actually sustained. That was irrelevant and prejudicial. And that's not even the reason, most likely. It probably was, he's going to divorce me and need somebody else because he's not going to want to do this, in my opinion. One thing that I found really odd, and this is something that both attorneys were doing with this nurse, they were asking her to give opinions about other providers' notes. So she had to keep saying, well, I can read this off and explain what the words mean, but I didn't write these notes. Both prosecution and defense were doing that. That was really odd. One of the night nurses was testified. She said that Lindsay had no affect, meaning absolutely blunt emotion, no feelings of any kind. In fact, she even told Patrick reportedly that she wished she could feel something. And I can imagine that intellectually going, these horrible things have happened. I'm in a hospital. My kids are dead. I did it. And and it's just a fog. And yet people don't, it's like, I actually saw a video not too long ago of a famous dude. I'm not going to even mention his name because I don't want to turn into a debate. But he mentioned waking up in hospital and being delirious. And nobody is going to call him a bad person for not feeling things because he's a famous dude and whatever. But she's somehow bad because she's not feeling anything for anything after killing her kids. I mean, she was in delirium. Her brain is literally not functioning. More about the healthcare proxy. Also, that Lindsay asked for a DNR, meaning a do not resuscitate order. But right after a S attempt, they wouldn't grant that for obvious reasons. And so that making sure that that she's in a stable place mentally before they'd make that kind of a change. Then we saw a hospital psychiatrist, and she did a really great job. Unlike some of the other ones, which we'll get to. So when Lindsay arrived at the hospital, her Glasgow Coma score was a 10, and the range is 3. 3 is the lowest you can score, and up to 15. So she was pretty severely out of it. She was diagnosed with delirium. She was having difficulty communicating, understanding. She was having hallucinations. And they said, yes, that could be in part due to anesthesia because she had back surgery that night, but a lot of other things can cause it, including postpartum psychosis. And yes, she had hallucinations in the hospital. But then the prosecution wants to point out, I can't remember if it was this witness or another, like, oh, what was she pointing out, like a unicorn in the corner? Okay, you don't need a unicorn in the corner to be having hallucinations. There's a whole range of hallucinations. Can be auditory. It could be a sound. It can be a song that you heard one time. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff. So stop it. This particular psychiatrist was not part of changing the DNR or the healthcare proxy or any of that decision. Because you don't do that when there's delirium in the picture. You have to do it with a clear mind. So the prosecution then kept hounding her on saying, were you aware that she had no brain injury?
Were you aware that Ms. Clancy did not have a brain injury at that time?
One of the things that we look at is any kind of relevant medical information that might be available to us. And I noticed that her Glasgow Coma scale, when she was transferred to Brigham and Women's Hospital, was a 10, which would indicate that she could potentially have had a moderate brain injury. But I don't recall thinking about specifically whether she had a brain injury.
Were you aware that a CAT scan was done, page 110 of the records? On the CAT scan, the impression was no acute intracranial findings, so no brain injury.
So you can.
CAT scan.
I did review the head imaging that was available at the time. You can have a normal CAT scan and still have a brain injury.
Were you aware that she had multiple CAT scans at South Shore Hospital and at Brigham and Women's that showed no skull fractures, no intracranial bleeding, no hemorrhaging, no visible damage whatsoever?
Yes.
Okay. And were you aware that she was evaluated at South Shore Hospital and at the Brigham, and she had no external injuries on her head either?
Yes.
Well, she had several CAT scans, and you can still have a brain injury and have it not show on a CAT scan. And I wanted to just scream, like, I'm not a doctor, and I know some of this stuff. Like, you can have a lot of brain injuries don't show up on a CAT scan or on an MRI, like chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Anyway, the one that the football players often get from repeated hits to the head, that one you can't diagnose unless it's an autopsy situation. After you're dead, you can't tell in a scan. There are a lot of traumatic brain injuries you can't tell in a scan, but she just kept harping on it. So on cross, the defense confirmed that psychosis does not mean that a person can't talk coherently, that they have to be acting like a zombie. They can function. They can function quite well. The behavior that can be a warning sign for psychosis can include hypomania, bipolar type behavior, including increased exercise, insomnia, things that by themselves mean little or nothing, but together are red flags. And Lindsay had several red flags. Okay, so eventually they get to her mood getting a little bit better, that she was no longer having delusions or homicidal or suicidal intent. On Tuesday, we had a whole bunch of stipulations between the prosecution and defense to speed things up. In theory, stipulations meaning these are facts that we can agree upon. We don't have to prove it in court. We're just agreeing on these facts. And so it's supposed to be, Wrightington said, we're not contesting any of the medical records, chain of custody, none of that. Can we just speed along, please? So after the prosecution agreed to stipulations, great. And then the prosecution proceeds to bring up all of those same witnesses anyway. Waste of freaking time. And then I was getting annoyed again when it came to some of the lawyering, because in addition to that, the ICU nurse, they made her like read off people's notes, which was odd. Both of the lawyers, both sides, are testifying and asking leading questions like constantly about things that aren't in evidence. Were you aware that blah 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 blah? And the blah 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 isn't in evidence. Like we that should be in evidence already before you bring it up and say, were you aware of it? But they're throwing all of these things that have not been put into evidence. Like, what are you? I'm not a lawyer, but I know that's completely wrong. It's driving me crazy, and both sides are doing it, but no one's objecting. So carry on, I guess. It's so weird. The prosecution kept going back to the pill bottles that were in Patrick's truck. So you'll recall that those are pills that Lindsay was not going to be taking. She'd gotten different prescriptions, and so those were for Patrick to dispose of properly. And they found those in his truck. And then they're like, oh, but she only takes 7 pills from this bottle. And they're making it sound like the pills in those bottles were proof that she wasn't taking her medicine, rather than, well, these are pills where she's no longer taking, or things were changed over, or whatever else. Those pills are almost irrelevant, and yet they still are forgetting the pills that were in her nightstand that the police somehow didn't find, but they found the ones in the truck. Okay, but she had taken those, so whatever. Reddington took multiple cops to account that they didn't find the medication bottles in her nightstand, which I think was fantastic. There's a toxicologist on the stand at the end of Tuesday. There's 2 more experts, a toxicologist, and the prosecution had already had one witness explain what a metabolite is, which is when a substance breaks down, it breaks down into these other things. And so earlier in the trial, we learned that, like, say, Valium, or it wasn't Valium. It's one of the benzos can break down and into 3 other ones, and then some of those are actually individual prescriptions you can buy for those. So it doesn't mean that that she took all 3 of those, but that each one of those were part of this other one. She had someone explain that already, but she needed this toxicologist to explain it again, and she couldn't get it out. Like, she was trying to get this toxicologist to explain it. It wasn't coming out. It was just hilarious.
And as far as the particular substances that were detected, when you are running these tests, it doesn't tell you that there were several different drugs that were necessarily consumed by the individual, correct?
I don't know if I understand your question.
Well, are there certain substances that come up in these screens that could be attributable to the same type of drug?
There are certain, we would call them parent drugs and metabolites. Once you ingest the medication, your body will begin to metabolize or break that drug down. So there could be metabolites that are related to the parent compound of the medication that was taken.
So where there were 5 positive or detected substances doesn't mean that there was 5 specific substances, especially where there was a metabolite detected, correct? I guess that.
I'm not sure I follow your question again.
That's okay. As far as these particular items or these particular substances that were detected in these screens, you weren't able to provide any further information for final review other than they were detected.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Then the defense gets up.
So in the results that have been described numerous times, there's the reference to metabolite, and there's 5 drugs. Doesn't mean there's 5 drugs. It could be 1 drug with a metabolite. All a metabolite means is that it's a breakdown of the same drug at some point, right?
Correct.
Like if you're smoking marijuana or something, you have carboxy-9 or whatever they call it. It can be some residue in your blood, right?
Yes, the way that.
From the breakdown.
Yes.
So this and that, yeah, there you go. He basically got the same witness to say exactly what the prosecution was trying to get her to say. Prosecutor Reddington, I just love Reddington. He's fantastic. He just handled it. Kind of said down to him. Then we have a blood spatter expert. Another one. What was the point? Yes, it's her blood. Here's how drops looked versus this versus that. But it was like, oh, there's a lot of blood here, which meant she stood in this one spot for a few seconds and didn't have enough blood to fall. Just to me shows she cut herself deeply enough to have enough blood to be dripping out of her. But then there's this whole debate as to whether she hung on the outside of the windowsill and kind of Spider-Man her way down to the ground rather than like going out head first. Again, it's making it sound like, trying to take her own life was not part of the intention, which I think is just insane, but whatever. No pun intended.
It's not appropriate, if you will, to speculate that something is blood, and that's why it's referred to as a red-brown stain, right?
Correct. We use
but your experience is such that you have a wealth of knowledge as to the ability to draw an inference as to what it might be, right?
We're not able to look at a red-brown stain and call it blood. We call it by adjectives, so it would be deemed as a red-brown stain. We have to wait until we do a confirmatory test to say whether we call it human blood or not.
Did you look at all that object? 'Cause,
I did not, just
okay. Would you agree that
From the future here, jumping in we're going to include some of the journal entries, both from the prosecution and from the defense that they read. They're heartbreaking, but important.
Obsessed with his sleep and nap schedule, like to the minute. Says hearing him cry for 1+ hours and not intervening just about killed me. I even said the words, "I want to die" to Pat while he was crying. After that, I became obsessed with his sleep and nap schedule, like to the minute. That's one of the entries you reviewed and
Correct.
noted.
Yes.
Page 2 says, I also feel like I did it wrong because I did it when he was overtired, so it made it harder. Now I have horrible insomnia and anxiety. You recall reviewing that in the journal.
Correct. Yes.
Page 4 of the journal says, why else I feel guilty. He's not really hitting his milestones. Again, that's a page that's not dated in this journal, correct?
Correct.
I'm completely overwhelmed trying to take care of the 3 kids. I feel like I'm drowning every day. Again, another page that's not dated.
Correct.
At some point, there are some dated pages in this journal, fair to say, right?
Yes.
And there's one on November 18th. That page reads, it's like I'm so desperate to get a mental break from taking care of everyone that my mind is trying to make something physically wrong with me. You recall reviewing that in the journal?
Yes.
I would also drive him around for car naps for hours every day, feeling guilty for doing this to my baby. Do you recall making that notation?
Yes.
I also feel guilty we did it too young, parenthesis, 1 week shy of 4 months, end parenthesis, right?
Correct.
You also noted in your report that I also, quote, I also feel like I did it wrong because I did it when he was overtired, so I made it harder. I now have horrible insomnia and anxiety, which is causing depression. I have no appetite. I don't know what's wrong with me. I want help. I want to be well. You saw that in there, didn't you?
Yes.
And then she went on and said, I think the anxiety started after sleep training. Doctor said it was okay to let him cry. I need to get a good night's sleep and take care of him, rocking him to sleep every nap in bed in the middle of the night. She noted that, right?
Yes.
Noting further in separate occasion, he's still a very happy baby despite his sleep training. Why I feel guilty is not really hitting his milestones, not rolling over, although he almost is, exclamation point, and he's babbling, which is a new milestone. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
She wrote, I have crazy brain fog. I feel like I can't make a plan. I can't carry it out. Like I just live moment to moment, waiting for the next nap time. I'm terrified of Cal getting overtired now because I feel I can't help him. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
She then wrote, I'm really worried about going back to work and not being able to function with the brain fog. I feel like I should start with a 4-hour shift and see how I do. I can't tell if I am withdrawing from Ativan and Benadryl, or is this my new baseline? I feel completely disconnected with my baby. I feel like I'm going through the motions every day. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
I feel horribly guilty about my marriage. I want to connect with Pat again. I know he needs it. I need it. I'm terrified because I'm terrified of the relationship. I am completely overwhelmed trying to take care of the kids. I'm drowning every day. I feel guilty that I'm spending my family's money and not making any. I feel like I spend way too much. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
I'm terrified of Callan getting sick. He's a sick baby. A sick baby is miserable. He's sick now with a double ear infection. Clearly has a bellyache. It's miserable. I feel like the other kids are going to get him sick all winter long. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
I always feel strongly against sleep training. I feel like it's abusive to let the baby cry and not respond, but I made the decision. I did it with Cal. It is way too much crying. It's incredibly stressful. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
He's okay. He will be okay. It's not harmful in any way. The doctor said it was okay. Plenty of people sleep train their kids at that age. It's necessary as a third child, is what she wrote, right?
Correct.
I feel incredibly sad and guilty about not breastfeeding anymore. That was the one thing I could do to help his immune system, and I can tell he really doesn't like the formula. I'm very sad about this. I know at this time it's what I needed to do for my mental health. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
And then the statement started getting smaller and smaller as time went by. One occasion, it's like I'm desperate to get a mental break from taking care of everyone. My mind is trying to make something physically wrong with me. My mind never shuts off. It's constantly thinking of the next thing someone needs. I can't shut it off. I desperately want to go back to work, but now I don't know how I'm going to function, and it worries me. Wrote that, right?
Correct.
There were 2 pages that were blank that she didn't even write on. And then on the third entry, affirmations. She wrote affirmations. On November 22nd of 2022, I am calm. I will remain calm today. There is nothing that needs to be on my mind. The weight is lifted from my mind. I will sleep tonight. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
Continuing on into November, I slept well last night. I will sleep again tonight. Today will be a great day. I will go back to work on Sunday. I will thrive. I can feel like myself again. That was November 23rd. She wrote that, right?
I believe that's the day, yes.
Gratitude. I'm grateful for Sue, who's always listening. That'd be a mother-in-law. You knew that, right?
Yes.
Sue, I'm grateful to Sue for always listening and trying her best to help me. Kids are sleeping great for Pat. Pat is handling nighttime stuff. Julie for making a plan for me. A big thing is I feel disconnected with myself. Time, reality. I think going back to work will help with that. She wrote that, right?
Correct.
And then there are numbers of pages, 22 of 63, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, all reproducing what counsel asked you about and what I just went through that were from those journals, right?
Correct.
Okay, on Wednesday was just a half day. And so we had more stipulations, okay, to speed things up. We all agreed to these facts. And then, of course, the defense goes on to just bring on those same witnesses anyway, specifically with DNA and toxicology. What was the point? We learned nothing new. And then they talk about the DNA and how the odds of, one to however many nonillion or whatever.
Non-million is a very large number.
Do you know how many people are on Earth?
I know it's...
This is typical DNA gobbledygook at this point, Judge.
Well, I object to his objection.
That's
ridiculous.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
they're going to talk
You can
about
ask.
non-millions and how many.
Counsel, can I see you over at sidebar?
Then we had a PA who was at the ER, he was the one who sutured Lindsay's hand. And on cross, I love this. Well, actually, on direct, he said that the one cut he had to suture was 3 centimeters deep. Okay, so 3 centimeters, that's almost that's pretty close to as deep as your arm almost is. 2.5 centimeters is an inch. So 3 centimeters, that's more than an inch deep. That's deep. That is deep. And on cross, he called it severe. So much for the prosecution constantly saying that she had superficial injuries. Stop it. That was severe deal. But then, so once he got the PA to say it was severe, then the prosecution gets back up for redirect and goes, okay, but
Deep in the medical notes is not a adjective of it, correct? It's more of a directionality of the injury.
It's a description of, basically an objective unit of measure.
But when we say deep, it means that it goes down into the skin as opposed to across
It
the
doesn't matter
skin.
what we say, it's what the records say.
All right, I understand. Go ahead. Just, if you could ask that question again.
trying to make it sound like it's, he still said severe. He said it was severe, regardless. Then their nanny got on the stand, which is another one where I'm like, why, prosecution? You're hitting yourself in the face again. What are you doing? If you're trying to show that that Lindsay was a bad mom, you're failing. Because the nanny says, yeah, she was a great mom. She was fantastic. I think what they were trying to do is to show that Lindsay is a control freak because she would write very detailed instructions. I did that too when my kids were little. In fact, there's one where my husband had just an outpatient procedure. My in-laws were going to be watching my then 2 kids. And I had like a binder full of like, here's some snacks, here's the activities, here's their schedule, and it was just for a day, one day. And I was like, this is what needs, and I never had postpartum psychosis, thank heavens, but that's just what moms do. In fact, when kids were older and I would travel for writing conferences or whatever, I would have to write down, this is just the basic things that moms keep in their heads that not everybody always has access to. So I call it my mom brain. I would write it all out just so everybody knew what was going on. That's not control freak behavior. I know a lot of moms who do that. That's just what it is. But whatever, prosecution, you're not helping your own case. So the day ended with Lindsay's own words when she said that I'm broken, and that was heartbreaking. Thursday, we had the medical examiner, and this is, again, prosecution, you are so dumb. They brought in Callan's autopsy photos, the baby. We didn't see the pictures, thank heavens. We don't need to see that. But Lindsay was sobbing, apparently. And it just, in fact, and then there were some issues somewhere in the courtroom said, get her out of here or something like that. So there was this whole big brouhaha. Like, did someone say that? Was it the prosecution who said something like that? And then the judge had to basically tell the entire courtroom, no outbursts, no saying something like that. You're going to be kicked out. If you say something like that, we're not really sure who said it or what. I've heard people say it actually was something else that was said, but it just sounded like get her out of here. Don't know. But she was absolutely sobbing, understandably so, during that. And the medical examiner's testimony, yeah, we know why Callan died. We know. We didn't need to hear that it was through strangulation. We knew. Family's pediatrician came and testified. Everything seemed normal. Prosecution asked, well, did Lindsay ever tell you about her postpartum depression? This is the pediatrician. How many people go to the pediatrician and talk about the parents' issues? Not what you do at the you don't go to a neurologist and discuss your diabetes. Like, get a clue, guys. Or like, I don't take my mother to her rheumatologist and then discuss my problems. So this is not what we're doing. In the end, the doctor said that she, quote, I always thought she was a good mom. Then we heard from two of the preschool teachers who knew both Cora and Dawson, said that as in the fall, then Patrick started dropping off the kids a little bit more often than Lindsay, which would make sense. Lindsay was getting more overwhelmed at that point. I'm wondering why that question was, that to show that Lindsay wasn't as involved as before. I mean, Patrick was an involved parent, so whatever. Did she ever tell you about her mental health issues? Well, no. Do you talk to your kids' teachers and tell them about your problems? I don't think so. The other teacher described the kids, said that Cora had a tummy ache that day, and when Lindsay came pick her up and said, baby, let's pick up Dawson and go home. She said that Lindsay was a loving mother who cared about her children. And the day of, she didn't seem any different. So I'm sure the prosecution was like, oh, so she wasn't psychotic on that day. Well, not in that moment anyway. Or maybe she was having hallucinations and didn't realize it, and it was still functioning, because you can drive a car and stuff depending on what type of just psychosis you're in. Then they brought up one of Lindsay's coworkers from labor and delivery, a fellow friend who'd known her since she'd start working at the hospital as a new nurse. They saw each other for lunch a couple of times, including once in November. Lindsay said, I don't feel ready to go back to work. I have insomnia, so that I don't think I could do it properly. But she loved being a labor and delivery nurse, said she had brain fog. Her friend group via text was encouraging her to get help, recommending therapy, medication, all these different things. And her friend group sounds like a lot of them were like therapists themselves or that kind of thing. And so they knew what they were talking about. In January, Lindsay told the same friend that she was in an intense program and couldn't get together for a little while. And now we know that she was briefly in an inpatient psych ward where she didn't get much help, unfortunately. Patrick complained that she wasn't getting the aid that she needed. But this friend said that she thought that Lindsay sounded always hopeful that they would find a solution. On cross, that we talked about, that we learned that Lindsay loved being a nurse and was excellent at it, and she loved being a mom. And Lindsay often checked on her kids at home during a night shift. She'd like to look at the cameras and whatnot and check on her kids. Very thoughtful and loving mother. Another friend, the one who was a marriage and family therapist, said that she noted that Lindsay was really tired after Callan's birth, and that Lindsay seemed to be getting more concerned that her symptoms weren't getting better. She didn't tell this friend about the ideation. She said that at Cora's birthday party in January, Lindsay said things had not gotten any better and that she felt like a zombie. Prosecution objected to that one, of course, because they don't want her sounding like a zombie. But Lindsay was described as being warm and loving towards her kids, not a complainer. Then one of Lindsay's childhood friends, who's known her almost her whole life, they texted frequently over the years. They had a friend breakfast in November. I didn't see anything unusual. Texting just days before the kids died. Lindsay said that the meds gave her dark thoughts, and she was getting weaned off of them. And then this friend visited Lindsay in the psych ward in March after 2 months after the kids had been killed, didn't talk to the kids. Prosecution was like, you didn't talk to her about her children? It's horrible. Like, you didn't even mention them. She's like, actually, it's a very difficult subject. And, this is on cross. Then Reddington managed to get this out of her that Lindsay's sister said, don't bring it up. This is a touchy subject. We know, we all know why she's here. We're just not going to talk about it right now. Well, duh. And this friend said, I knew her as a good person, a good friend, and a good mom. Then they did another really stupid witness, in my opinion. They bring on her father-in-law, Lindsay's father-in-law, who had a good relationship with her. Lindsay apparently had reached out to his wife many times, her own mother-in-law. And what kills me is that with this witness and so many others, the prosecution never says anything like, this must be hard for you. I'm sorry for your loss. This is difficult for you to be here today. I'm so sorry. No, they just ask these horrible questions. That would help the prosecution, I think, if they showed that they had a heart. Because they're accusing Lindsay of not having one, but they seem as cold as ice themselves. His father-in-law says that, yeah, she seemed very quiet over Thanksgiving. Prosecution did not like that. They're like, oh, but you just said before that she was normal. Normal on what scale, right? I mean, just a little quieter than usual, whatever. Then they made this big deal out of the fact that Dawson was a little bit rambunctious that day, and Lindsay grabbed his arm, trying to get him back to the table, I think, and almost implying that was abusive. And he goes, no, he was a kind of just an energetic kid, and I helped her with him, and she was getting a little frustrated, but no, that's what happens with kids. So yeah, nice try, but no. Then the prosecution seriously asked him, getting the phone call about learning about from Patrick, I believe, about what had happened. What was it like to get that phone call? Are you kidding me? He said it was terrible. What did you expect him to say? Well, I was kind of curious. So I don't know. It was a walk in the park. What on earth did you expect him to say? You psycho. What a horrible question. I just, like, I get annoyed watching like true crime interviews where they say that. What did it feel like when your daughter was murdered? I'm like, don't do that. Like that's Keith Morrison does it best, where he sits there and goes, well, what did you do, or how did you react, or what did you say, or and then he gets the emotion out of them. He doesn't ask the obvious, what did it feel like? Please. Anyway, but Reddington has a heart, and it seems like the prosecution does not. So then we had a state trooper talking about how he went to CBS to get security footage. He got a warrant for the blood is on the outside of the house. Then he had found a Facebook post that she had put or a question on a Facebook page called Parenting for Littles, from like 2 or 3 years before, when Dawson was little, like 19 months old, and she was getting frustrated because he just fought her every step of the way. I don't know why they brought that up. What, because she was looking for help again with her previous child? To me, that shows she's a good mom, and she wanted to be a good mom. Help me out. Then let's see. The Thursday ended with courtroom drama, and this brought me joy, where we had the defense and the prosecution debating over upcoming defense witnesses. The prosecution saying, well, Reddington didn't submit these things in a timely case with blah, 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 blah. And he counters that, okay, well, the prosecution has been throwing new things at him just in the last minute too, and he hasn't complained. But he also said, okay, if I technically submitted these things past a certain date, and therefore these experts are not allowed in because of my error, then that is ineffective assistance of counsel. That was not in the interest of justice, and this could be overturned, and it just bring me joy. So some of the arguments that the prosecution put forth, the prosecution said, whatever his experts are going to say is just redundant. It's nothing new. And I'm like, that describes 2/3 of your witnesses already, but whatever. So that's her one argument, is it's just redundant. But then at the same time, she says, okay, but we don't know what they're going to say. And we're going to have to do lots of research and figure out a cross-examination. Okay, pick one. Those are complete opposites. You can't argue both. You apparently just tried to, but that doesn't make any sense. And then the whole issue as to whether or not the strategy as to whether that was a real attempt. The prosecution claimed, oh, we never said that. That's not our strategy at all. And the judge was like, dude, you've been applying that this entire time. So the judge picked up on it. Like we all did. That's what they've been saying this whole time. They have been. But she said, oh no, we were saying that it just wasn't the means she used weren't effective. They would have been without very quick action on a lot of people's part. So yeah.
Sure, Jan.
That same day, the very day that they're arguing this, a decision came out from the Supreme Court of that area, overturning one of this judge's own cases with a woman who had killed her children in psychosis. Very similar. And he didn't allow certain medical evidence in, and then it was overturned because of that. So I suspect And he knew this decision was coming down the pike. So, and it landed the same day. It's just like kismet. I think he'll let these experts in. I don't think there's a way he couldn't. He'll probably throw the prosecution a bone by saying, okay, but limit it to X, Y, and Z or something like that. But it'll be there. Okay, Friday, we get back to beating a dead horse. But instead of first responders, it's witnesses showing that Lindsay was a good mom. We have a child care service person from the exercise club that she went to. Yeah, she was kind of shy. No, she didn't tell the daycare worker about her mental health struggles, but she seemed like a really good mom who was never late picking up her kids. Her kids were always excited to see her. Female friend of Patrick's. Yeah, she seemed great. I don't know. I know she was quieter than usual. Again, prosecution didn't like that. But did Lindsay ever tell you about her stuff? No, I was one of Patrick's close friends, not Lindsay's. We never confided in each other like that. Duh. Okay, then we have 2 psychiatrists. Oh heavens. I believe these 2 psychiatrists are part of the civil suit that the families are suing over like malpractice. So the first one, she worked at the psych unit that she was actually in before all of this went down. I think she really hurt the prosecution, was not a good witness at all. Her work history, when she described where she's worked before, seems to have there's a lot of places she's worked, and it doesn't seem like she's anywhere with a very long duration, which to me seemed like a little bit of a red flag. A lot of what the prosecution did was just background, laying information, defense, objections, overrules, blah, blah, blah. There wasn't a whole lot there. The initial evaluation, she said that, the chief complaint was insomnia. I'm like, okay, so it just driving me crazy is both these psychiatrists go off about whatever the patient tells them. Essentially, they just believe it, and they don't dig further, which is problematic on so many levels. Because even a patient who is not dealing with mental health crises is not going to remember necessarily all the pertinent information. Will forget really important stuff in the moment. Like, okay, remember it right now. So I've taken my senior mother, to some of her doctor's appointments, and she can just be a little overwhelmed at these things. And so she might not, there's a lot of things she don't remember. Doctors say, what symptoms are you dealing with? And she'll say 2 or 3 things, and I'm like, oh, but remember this and this and this and this. Oh, yeah, yeah. And she's not trying to be deceptive, and she's not dealing with postpartum anything. But she'll just forget stuff in the moment. You can't just assume a patient, because they can speak coherently, will remember all those things in the moment. So just listening to Lindsay is not how it's supposed to be. The next concern, they were like, she was diagnosed with major depressive order, severe, but without psychosis. That was in January, I believe. The next main patient concern, that she didn't want to be dependent on sleep medication. It's like, so the doctor seemed like, she's like, okay, let's wean you off. And I'm like, okay, how about we get her out of her crisis, and then we'll wean her off. It seems like the doctors were like, oh, you don't want to be on medication? Let's take you off then. Okay, but she's still in crisis. We'll work on getting off medication once you're stable. But if she can't sleep, okay, we'll take you off the sleep meds then. What? Then Lindsay disagreed with the suspected bipolar. Doctor goes, okay, that must not be it then. Bipolar is notoriously difficult to diagnose and treat. A lot of people go under the radar, especially with the mania end, because to them, the mania is not the problem. If they have all this extra energy and they're exercising more, they're redecorating or reorganizing the living room or whatever in the middle of the night, to them, that does not seem like a problem. So they might not even recognize their own mania. So it's bizarre to me. I know people who've been diagnosed later in life, and they look back and go, oh yeah, in high school I did this, and that would be mania, but I didn't see that at the time, and no one else did either. Lindsay says that she had no ideation, or at least no plan for it. Doctor goes, okay, I guess that's fine. And then the question was, were you concerned that she was being discharged without monitoring her sleep? And she goes, well, I'm not concerning her safety. How'd that work out for you? Yeah, that's so great. And then Lindsay never complained that she wasn't seeing doctors. And that was something that she wasn't seeing a lot of doctors, but she never complained about it. If you're in a psych ward, do you seriously have to advocate for yourself or else it's your fault that the doctors don't see you? Like, well, give me a break. So Patrick was speaking up, but they didn't listen to him either. When she was discharged, she was given resources, which basically amounted to go to some of these websites. Okay, that's great. Patrick told the social worker that he didn't think that she was getting adequate care. Adequate care, ding, 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 absolutely. They grilled her on much of Lindsay's medical history. This is Reddington on defense. And they did not learn much of anything about her past history at all. Minimal evaluations, some very minimal testing. Sounds like just asking the most basic information and making huge assumptions. So the doctor claims, this is the same psychiatrist, that she has never treated someone with postpartum psychosis. Asked her how many with postpartum depression. She goes, "Oh, I don't know. I don't keep records." You don't keep, okay, it's one thing to say, I don't tally that up, but you don't keep records. What? Okay. She also didn't know that Lindsay had called the helpline twice, postpartum psychosis, and the DSM. That I knew going in this that that's actually not in the DSM yet. They're talking about putting it into the DSM-6. We're currently on the 5, but Reddington clearly knew that it's not in the DSM-5. But the way the questioning wasn't that clear if you didn't already know that. But the psychiatrist didn't know that. Oh, I think it's like a subsection of blah, 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 blah. She didn't know it's not even in there. He asked about Lindsay's thyroid levels and what the thyroid is. And she goes, "I don't know. I'm not an internal medicine doctor." Okay. You mean endocrinologist. Again, I'm not a doctor. So an internal medicine doctor can specialize with endocrinology, but all internal medicine doctors are not endocrinologists. There's the Venn diagram, the overlap isn't that great. Oh my gosh, it just, ugh. So, okay, we're gonna stop right there through us about half of Friday, because the next person to get on the stand was Jennifer Test, the psychiatrist who was the primary one treating Lindsay from September all the way until all of this happened. She's very young. She was 1 month into practicing independently when she first met Lindsay. Never met her in person, never saw her in person until she was in court, but they had 14 telehealth visits. And yeah, she was young, and despite her education and training, yeah, she's another one that's being sued civilly, and Reddington takes her to task. So in the next video, we will talk about her direct examination, which was the rest of Friday, and then Monday, Reddington got to cross her, and he was excellent. I feel bad for her. She's in a bad place. Anyway, let me know what you think with all this. Where are you leaning? Please keep the comments respectful, and you can disagree, but don't be cruel, and be kind about mental health things, especially. So I think what I'm hoping is that through this, most people are looking at the situation and saying, this is tragic. She was psychotic. Don't know if she's criminally liable, but what is the best solution for this family and for moving forward, and for the law also moving forward? Not just lock her up and throw away the key, but what's the best solution for this type of tragic, horrific situation? So let me know what you think. Like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.